exposing the truth behind our family portrait. Before we begin the story, make sure to subscribe to our channel and never miss more incredible stories every day. She grabbed my camera card and said, "We don't document flaws." Those words should have bounced off the bright paper backdrop and vanished into softbox light. Instead, they stuck to the back of my throat like a swallowed tack. I'm Claire, 33, the family's de facto archivist, a teacher who moonlights as a weekend photographer because I love the way truth hides inside good light. Every spring my mother, Valerie, stages our perfect portrait. Coordinated blues, manicured lawn, the same white frame she's used since Jamie and I were kids. She books the boutique studio uptown now, no more backyard shots, but the script hasn't changed. Chins up, stomachs in, no shadows, no stories. This year the studio smelled like lemon cleaner and nerves. The photographer, a sweet woman named Mara, adjusted my brother's collar while Mom hovered like a director who paid for the film herself. Dad, Graham, smiled the way he always has, boyish and kind, a man who learned long ago that silence is a safer investment than truth. I'd brought my own camera to grab candids in between takes. That's when I caught the blink. Mom's left hand slipped behind her back. A ring I didn't recognize flashed from her right. In the preview, a faint line traced along her jaw where makeup didn't fade so much as smear. Nothing big, nothing fatal, but I'm a details person. I notice when the curtain moves and there's no breeze. "Let me see," Mom said, too casual, palm out. I laughed. "You'll get the gallery, same as always." She didn't laugh back. She stepped closer, perfume sharp. "We don't document flaws," she repeated, softer and colder. "Hand it over." Mara froze like we'd walked onto a set where the script had changed. Jamie muttered, "Mom," and rubbed his neck, eyes flicking to the exit as if we could leave the moment the way people leave rooms. I didn't hand over the card. I slid it into my back pocket and said, "We document us." Something mean flickered and vanished in her eyes. She pivoted to Mara, oozing charm. "Let's do a retake," she sang. "Tighter light. Smoother skin." The word smoother felt like a request and a verdict. We smiled and held our breath for a shudder that suddenly sounded like a door locking from the inside. On the way out, the studio receptionist handed Mom 2 invoices. I glimpsed the headers, Session A and Session B, same date, different times. Mom tucked them into her bag without looking. She kissed my cheek in the parking lot and whispered, "Don't ruin this year, Claire." I drove home with my camera belt digging into my hip and the taste of lemon cleaner in my mouth, thinking about that second invoice like a second life hiding under our first. And before the traffic light turned green, a calendar invite appeared. Anniversary dinner slideshow, family only, bring highlights. We were raised to believe the frame made us better. Every living room we ever lived in had a gallery wall of annual us. Kindergarten bangs, orthodontic bravado, from tuxes that fit like lies. Mom curated it like a museum of controlled weather. No storms, just spring forever. When we fidgeted at 6, she said, "Statues don't squirm." When we cried at 12, she said, "Pretty eyes don't puff." By the time I hit 20, I'd learned to breathe shallow so my ribs didn't bend the sweater she picked. Our little fixer of flaws, she called me when I started retouching school photos for extra cash. She meant it as a crown and a warning. You're useful as long as you keep the world smooth. Dad kept traditions running like a quiet generator. He ironed, he paid, he fetched. He cut his own discomfort into bite-sized, swallowable pieces. Jamie learned early that certain silences earned bigger allowances. I learned that perfection isn't the absence of mess. It's the skill of hiding it well. The fresh cut landed 2 days after the studio session. Mom texted me a filtered selfie in a silk blouse, captioned, "Need you to work your magic on the proofs. Soften my jaw, brighten eyes, trim Claire's flyaways." I replied with a thumbs up I didn't mean and sat at my laptop to review the raws Mara had shared. That's when the first red fleck blinked at me. The EXIF data on the final family shot said 6:18 p.m., but the sequence of candids I'd taken showed Dad yawning at 6:22 in the same pose. The retake Mom demanded was time-stamped 7:05, yet the studio doorbell log, visible on a little monitor by the desk when we left, had us checked out at 6:47. Maybe a clock was off. Maybe I'm obsessive. Maybe my mother is a magician who never shows her sleeves. I toggled before and after on my screen and paused. In last year's portrait, a thin white scar on Dad's temple, bike spill when I was 8, was gone. Not softened, gone. In the Christmas frame from the year Jamie quit drinking, his wine glass had been replaced in post with a sparkling water that reflected light in a way glass never does. I flipped to the invoices I'd photographed in my car like a teenager stealing answers, and there it was, Session B. Alternate set. Confidential. Fee triple the standard. I'd never seen that line on any bill. I closed my laptop and stared at the wall. When did our smiles become contracts? When did love become lighting and edits and alternate sets no one was allowed to acknowledge? My phone buzzed with a courier alert. Delivery scheduled. Signature required. The sender was a private attorney whose name I didn't recognize. The package was addressed to Dad. And in that vibration, something delicate in our gallery rattled hard enough to crack. I started a log because logs don't gaslight. Date, time, file names, who said what, who flinched. I copied the EXIF strings into a doc and circled the offsets. I wrote down the invoice numbers and the receptionist's initials. I added a note about Mom's ring, the unfamiliar gold that flashed then hid, like a character with one line in Act 1 who shows up with motive in Act 3. The courier brought the envelope at 9:14 a.m. Dad opened the door in his robe, hair sleep-flattened, eyes gentle and startled. Mom materialized behind him in a cardigan with nothing under it but control. "I'll take that," she told the guy with the clipboard. He asked for Graham's signature. She laughed like bells. "He's terrible with pens." I stepped forward. "He can sign," I said. The courier handed the pad to Dad, who scribbled like a man signing a receipt for his own life. Mom closed the door and headed for the study. "Private," she tossed over her shoulder. I waited 30 seconds, then knocked. I lied. She opened the door 3 inches and smiled like a stage light. "Later, darling." I saw a thick letterhead, an embossed seal, and Dad's hand flat on the desk, as if calming a skittish animal. Outside, Jamie texted me, "Please don't start." Mom's stressed. "The dinner has to be perfect." I typed back, "Perfection isn't honesty." He replied with a photo of last year's portrait and a heart emoji, which felt like someone complimenting a mask while you're suffocating under it. I called Aunt Ruth, our family's only professional cynic. She worked 20 years as a paralegal and now Gardens Like the Earth is a client who deserves better representation. I told her about Session B and the courier. She hummed. "Alternate set means alternate story," she said. "Ask for invoices. If they vanish, you found your first confession." At lunch, I visited the studio with a box of pastries and Mara's favorite coffee. People who handle cameras usually handle truth if you hold it gently. In the back room, she looked tired. "Your mother signs NDAs," she admitted. "Sometimes clients ask for, archival adjustments." I asked, "Like deleting scars or drinks?" She nodded. "Or swapping people between frames." I felt my own jaw shift, like the bone decided to make room for something I didn't want to swallow. "We keep the original proofs for a week, then purge," she said. "But sometimes I forget." She slipped me a sticky note with a link to a hidden folder. Password is the studio dog's name. I went home and opened the link. Duplicate proofs waited like guilty twins. In one set, a woman who wasn't my mother stood 3 feet from Dad, face half-turned, eyes soft. In another, Mom stood alone, ring glinting, smile bright and brittle. In the payment notes, tuition support, Zelle, sent monthly to a surname I'd never seen. And in a separate PDF, a list of framed prop inventory stored offsite under Valerie V. Props/frames. When the doorbell camera pinged that evening, Mom's alibi would insist she'd been home arranging flowers. But the timestamp showed her at the bank, depositing cash with the woman from the proofs. By morning, the studio called from a blocked number. A man who introduced himself as management cleared his throat and thanked me for supporting our premium archival services. Then he slid a velvet threat between syllables. "Clients purchase confidentiality," he said. "It would be unfortunate if misunderstandings affected your family's celebration." I asked for the definition of archival. He replied, "Alternate sets for legacy display," as if that were a normal sentence and not a confession that time can be rented by the hour. I hung up and wrote the words down, Because ink doesn't flinch when people weaponize politeness. At lunch, Mom invited me to her house to pick slideshow songs. She had cucumber water and a smile that felt like decaf. Pretty, but empty. You've always had such an eye, she cooed. Let's keep it positive this year. Your father tires easily. We walked past the portrait wall, our history lined up like obedient schoolchildren. I paused at the year Jamie broke his wrist skateboarding. In the photo, his cast had been retouched to a tasteful gray sleeve. Continuity, Mom said lightly. Nobody wants reminders of pain. I said, pain is part of the portrait. Her smile thinned. Only for people who enjoy mess. When I asked to see the attorney's envelope, she laughed. Legalese bores you. I said, it rarely bores me. She tilted her head. Darling, don't turn every paper into a mystery. Families need harmony. Dad hovered in the doorway with 2 mugs he didn't drink from. It's just estate housekeeping, he murmured. Your mother likes things neat. He looked at the rug when he said it, as if neatness were something you could trip over. In the hallway, Jamie intercepted me. Please, he whispered, don't escalate. The anniversary dinner, it means everything right now. I asked, to who? He said, to the people who pay the mortgages. Honesty from him always arrived with receipts attached. I went home and opened the hidden folder again. I enlarged the frame with the unknown woman. Late 40s, kind mouth, hand hovering near my father's sleeve like a memory afraid to touch down. In the metadata, file name alt_set_, family_2, comment field, client selects final narrative. Narrative, not truth, not memory. Narrative. At 6:41 p.m. my phone buzzed with a new calendar entry created by Valerie V. Family Admin. Slideshow practice. Claire to bring raw files for on-site edit. And at 6:43 p.m. an email arrived from the studio with an NDA attached and the subject line, avoiding unnecessary confusion before the big night. Isolation always starts as convenience. The family group chat lit up with song suggestions and remember when photos, except I wasn't in it. I found out when Jamie texted a screenshot of Mom's message. Claire can deliver the files, we'll handle sequencing. I scrolled the participant list he accidentally revealed. Mom, Dad, Jamie, and a cousin who owes her money. Not me. I typed, deleted, typed again. Finally, add me or I won't contribute. Jamie called a minute later. She thinks you're spiraling, he said softly. Just give her what she needs. I thought of every year I had rescued a pixelated smile and called it love. What she needs isn't what the truth needs, I said. He exhaled. Please don't make this ugly. I met Aunt Ruth at the diner with my binder. She turned each page like a judge handling delicate evidence. Ask for copies of every contract your mother signed with the studio, she said. Ask for the invoices from the bank where the cash deposits match session B dates. Ask for the courier record from the law office. She tapped her pen. If you're wrong, paper will clear her. If you're right, paper will corner her. We started requesting. The studio's receptionist wrote back that client privacy restricts sharing. I replied with the specific invoice numbers I had photographed. After an hour, Mara emailed quietly. I'm leaving a packet at the back door. 10 p.m. Dog's name is still the password. At 10:04, I found a manila envelope containing session logs and a note. I'm sorry. I just take pictures they ask for. At the bank, a manager confirmed multiple cash deposits in amounts that matched the tuition support, Zelle payments. Same dates, same rounded figures. The recipient's surname on Zelle matched a woman's last name in the alt_set folder caption. Family Scholarship Fund? The manager offered, nervous. Clients do that. I asked, with NDAs attached. He stared at his screen until the cursor looked like a metronome beating guilt. That night, Mom left me a voicemail, smile stretched through sound. Sweetheart, Jamie tells me you're anxious. Let's not weaponize memories. Bring the card tomorrow. I'll make your favorite lemon bars. Lemon bars have always been her sugar-coated truce. I pressed delete and added lemon bars equals appeasement to the log because sweetness can be a kind of silence. And then the storage company pinged a new auto-pay. Account holder, Valerie V. Unit labeled props/frames, payment memo, portrait archive overflow, do not discard. Ruth said, storage units are where secrets dress up as organization. We drove across town to a concrete building that smelled like dust and delayed truths. I'd lifted the unit number from the billing email. Ruth brought a clipboard and the kind of smile that makes attendants believe you belong everywhere. "We're adding an authorized user," she chirped. Papers appeared, signatures happened, and a padlock clicked open like a reluctant throat. Inside, garment bags labeled by year, a crate of frames wrapped in brown paper, a box marked backdrops, winter. On a metal shelf, I found a shoebox labeled proofs, hold. My hands shook as I lifted the lid. Inside lay contact sheets and small prints from sessions I recognized, and some I didn't. In one stack, our smiling family stood in the studio, but at the edge of frame, cut off in most, the same woman from alt_set watched us with a look that was not jealousy, not triumph, just a complicated tenderness I couldn't name. Tucked beneath was a school photo of a boy about 12, his eyes so much like my father's that my breath stopped. The back was stamped with a strip mall photographer's logo and a year that overlapped with the only summer Dad traveled for work 2 months straight. Ruth squeezed my shoulder. "Take photos. Don't remove originals." I photographed everything. Inventory labels, barcodes, the note taped inside the lid. "Keep until estate settled." Another box held copies of checks written to the same unfamiliar surname as the Zelle recipient, memo lines, books, tuition, medical. The handwriting wasn't Mom's. It was Dad's, loopier when he apologized. On a lower shelf, an accordion folder titled Legacy contained a typed addendum to a will and signed in the copies, but annotated in Mom's margin notes. "Present for signature after anniversary." My father's name appeared next to language about non-disclosure of prior obligations and distribution schedule contingent on compliance. Compliance read like inheritance with a leash. We closed the unit and sat in Ruth's car with the windows cracked. "What does this mean?" I asked, knowing exactly what it meant, but hoping English had a softer synonym. Ruth looked out at the rows of quiet doors. "It means your portrait has more people in it than your mother allowed." My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Please stop looking. You'll burn what's left." The attached image was our family's wall, today's date on a folded newspaper visible in frame. The text felt like a fingerprint pressed against my throat. I showed Ruth, who pursed her lips. "They know you're documenting. That means you're close." We traced the number. It was a prepaid burner, registered to nothing but silence. Still, the image couldn't have been taken without someone standing in my parents' living room today. Someone inside had delivered the warning. I went home and scrolled back through the cloud folder Mara had leaked. Alongside the alt_set images sat a zip file labeled slideshow drafts. Inside, I found sequences for the upcoming anniversary dinner. One version matched the timeline we all knew. The other, time-stamped only 2 hours earlier, was shorter, tighter, missing entire years. Those years overlapped exactly with the boys' school photo. In the revised sequence, 2006 to 2008 simply dissolved into a stock shot of a beach at sunset. Continuity. I whispered aloud, the word turning bitter. The next day, I visited Dad under the pretense of helping with yard work. He sat on the porch, fiddling with a mug. "How's your camera project?" he asked, voice paper thin. I asked about the courier envelope. His hand trembled. "Just some things your mother wanted organized." I pressed harder. "Estate things? Or family things?" He stared at the mug. "Both," he said, and then added, "Sometimes silence is mercy." I asked, "For who?" He looked up finally, eyes glossy. "For the ones who made mistakes too long ago to repair." When I got back to my apartment, a padded envelope waited at my door, no return address. Inside, a USB drive. On it were scanned checks from my father to the same surname, and a copy of a birth certificate. Male child, born 2006, father's name Graham V., mother's name redacted with black ink that looked smudged from a home scanner. The file name, hold for signature. PDF. I sat at my desk until the clock read midnight, the drive still in my palm like a live wire. Behind me on the wall hung my own photos, candid shots of students, landscapes without edits, faces caught mid-laughter. No alternate sets, just the truth. Then my phone buzzed with an invitation to a new calendar event, sent from Mom's account. Slideshow rehearsal, mandatory. Claire must bring all raw files. No exceptions. And the description field read, "Compliance ensures inclusion." The word compliance echoed until it no longer sounded like English. Ruth urged me to print everything. Metadata, storage photos, bank slips, even the threatening text. Redundancy saves truth, she said, sliding copies into a fireproof folder. If she smells confrontation, she'll try to erase evidence before anyone else sees it. At the records office downtown, I asked for public filings under our surname. Buried between mortgage renewals was a document stamped, draft, not recorded. It listed my father as grantor of a payable on death account, beneficiary surname matching the boys. The draft date? 2 weeks before the portrait session. My hands shook so hard I nearly dropped the folder. That night, I cornered Jamie. Have you ever heard of a half-brother? I asked. He froze like a deer catching headlights. Don't, he whispered. Please don't say that out loud. His phone buzzed in his hand. Mom's name lit the screen. He silenced it. She said it's handled. She said it protects us. I asked, from what? From knowing we're not the only family? He pressed his palms together. From losing everything we have left. The following morning, the studio receptionist called me back secretly. I can't talk long. But there's always 2 sets. Public and private. Your mother insists. I asked, why private? She hesitated. Because the private ones, sometimes they show who was really there. In the background of one alt_set image, I zoomed in on the unfamiliar boy again. His height, his smile, the way his hand lifted slightly toward my father. It all looked like a question mark begging for punctuation. That evening, Mom called me herself. Her voice was honey thickened with warning. Darling, I know you've been curious. But curiosity is expensive. Let's not make a spectacle at the dinner. Let's keep dignity intact. I said, dignity isn't silence. There was a pause long enough to fit a decade into it. Then she said softly, if you love your father, you'll close that folder. I hung up without replying, my chest tight. The next morning, an unmarked envelope slid under my apartment door. Inside was a printed family portrait, the alt_set version, with the unknown woman and boy clearly present this time. Scrawled across the bottom in my mother's handwriting. Some truths are better left framed, not spoken. I stared at the altered portrait until the ink bled into my vision. The boy's face, our father's cheekbones, unmistakable, was now undeniable. My mother hadn't just curated images, she'd curated lives. I drove to Ruth's house, clutching the envelope like it might combust. She laid the photo flat, slid her reading glasses on, and shook her head slowly. She escalated. If she's sending this to you, she's daring you. Ruth tapped the handwriting at the bottom. This is both a warning and a test. She wants to know if you'll fold. That night, I compiled everything into a single binder. USB scans, metadata printouts, bank slips, studio invoices, the portrait with the scrawled message. I labeled each tab with dates and file names, as if preparing a case. Because that's what it was now, a case against the family mythology. I considered confronting Dad alone, but Ruth urged caution. He's complicit by silence. She's his shield and his jailer. You need neutral ground. So I contacted an attorney Ruth trusted, Ms. Ramirez, who agreed to review the documents. Her voice was calm but firm over the phone. These aren't rumors anymore. These are receipts. If presented correctly, they will stand. Meanwhile, Jamie texted me late at night. Please, Claire, don't bring this up at the dinner. Mom says it'll ruin him. I replied, it's already ruined if we keep pretending. He didn't respond. In the days leading to the anniversary, tension thickened. Mom insisted on multiple rehearsals of the slideshow. She micromanaged seating charts, floral arrangements, even the timing of toasts. To anyone else, she seemed radiant. To me, every smile was a lock clicking shut. At the final rehearsal, she pulled me aside. Remember, darling, family portraits aren't about truth. They're about legacy. Her fingers dug into my arm with surprising strength. Legacy survives when flaws don't. I said nothing, but in my bag was a flash drive with the unedited slideshow Ruth and I had prepared. Side-by-side comparisons, original metadata, doctored dates, the unknown child. And in that moment, I decided the truth would surface at the anniversary dinner, no matter the cost. The anniversary dinner buzzed with relatives, colleagues, neighbors, an audience primed for celebration. My mother floated through the room like a queen hosting court, her pearls gleaming under the chandeliers. My father sat at the head table, smiling faintly, as if bracing for impact no one else could see. Jamie avoided my gaze, his hand shaking slightly as he raised a glass of wine. Ruth squeezed my shoulder as I set up the projector. "Stay steady," she whispered. "Facts first, emotions later." When the slideshow began, polite laughter filled the hall. Childhood snapshots, vacations, graduations, all perfectly curated. My mother exhaled softly with each slide, like a conductor guiding a symphony of applause. Then came the interruption. My version loaded. On the screen, two nearly identical family portraits appeared, one doctored, one raw. The differences screamed at anyone who looked closely. The scar erased from Jamie's chin, the EXIF timestamp glaringly inconsistent, the boy at the edge of the frame in one version, missing in the other. Gasps rippled across the room. "What is this?" someone muttered. My mother shot out of her chair. "Stop this immediately," she barked. But the next slide was already rolling. Bank transfers, storage invoices, the draft payable on death account, all labeled and timestamped. My father buried his face in his hands. Ruth leaned into the microphone. "These are not speculations. These are documented records." Jamie stood suddenly. "Claire, stop." His voice cracked, half pleading, half panicked. But my mother's mask had slipped. Her voice rose sharp, brittle. "You think exposing this makes you noble? It makes you cruel." I steadied my voice. Cruel is erasing people to protect appearances. The final slide appeared. The portrait with my mother's handwritten note. "Some truths are better left framed, not spoken." The room fell into stunned silence. My father finally looked up, eyes wet. "Valerie," he said hoarsely, "how long?" My mother's face hardened into a mask I barely recognized. And then, as if rehearsed, she said, "Since the year you left me no choice." Her words dropped like glass shattering on marble. The room erupted in whispers, chairs scraping against the floor. My father stared at her as though he'd been struck. "No choice," he repeated, his voice trembling. "Valerie, you forged papers, you lied for decades, and you say it was necessity?" She lifted her chin. "Do you think anyone would have respected us if the truth got out? That you'd fathered a child outside this marriage? That I had to clean up after your weakness?" Gasps rose from the crowd. Jamie's face drained of color. "Mom," he whispered. I stepped closer to the microphone. "So this boy, this half-brother, we're supposed to erase him? Pretend he doesn't exist so your portrait looks perfect?" My mother's voice sharpened into steel. "This family survives on respectability. Without it, everything crumbles. Our finances, our reputation, your futures." She swept her gaze over the room, daring anyone to contradict her. Dad's hands shook as he stood, clutching the edge of the table for balance. "All these years, I thought my silence was protecting us. But it was protecting you, Valerie." His eyes burned with something between rage and shame. Jamie buried his face in his palms. "I can't believe this is real," he muttered. Aunt Ruth stood then, her voice steady. "It is real, Jamie. Every receipt, every file. Your sister has the truth documented. This isn't cruelty. This is accountability." The relatives' murmurs swelled. Some looked at me with pity, others with disbelief. One uncle shook his head, muttering, "All for an image." My mother slammed her fist on the table. "Enough. This farce ends now. You'll give me that flash drive, Claire, or you'll regret it." I clutched the drive tighter in my pocket. "No, Mom. The truth doesn't go back in the frame." Her eyes narrowed to slits, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper only I could hear. "Then you've chosen war against your own family." And in that instant, I realized she meant it literally. The fallout began before dessert even arrived. Half the guests left early, muttering about scandal. Others lingered, hungry for more revelations. My father vanished into a side room, collapsing into a chair. Jamie hovered outside the door, torn between loyalty and horror. I followed Dad inside. He pressed his palms against his temples. "I failed you," he said hoarsely. "I failed all of you. I let her control everything because I couldn't face what I did." "Then face it now," I urged. "Own it. Stop letting her define this family with lies." He looked at me, tears cutting through the wrinkles of his face. "That boy, he's mine, and I've never even said his name aloud." Meanwhile, Ruth confronted my mother in the hall. I caught fragments, guardianship drafts, hush money, forgery. My mother's responses were smooth, practiced, for protection, for stability, for the family. But when I returned, Ruth handed me a folder she'd pulled from her bag. "I thought you might need this." Court protocols for contesting fraudulent documents. If she tries to enforce that guardianship or will addendum, you have grounds. My phone buzzed. An email from an unknown address. Subject line, enough with the secrets. Inside was a photo of the boy again, older now, standing in front of a school. The sender wrote, "He deserves the truth too." Jamie peeked at the screen and flinched. "Claire, if you push this, everything changes. Mom will cut us off. The money, the house, gone." I shook my head. "I don't care about money. I care about honesty." Jamie's hands trembled. "But honesty means admitting Dad betrayed us. And that Mom built a cage to hide it." Downstairs, the clatter of dishes echoed as staff began clearing the abandoned tables. My mother's voice rose once more, commanding, imperious. "We will continue as planned. There will be no scandal. Do you hear me?" Her tone was sharp enough to cut steel. And for the first time, my father stood and said, "No, Valerie, I don't hear you anymore." The room froze when my father raised his voice. For decades, he had let her orchestrate every detail, from financial statements to which ties he wore in the portraits. Now his words cracked the air like thunder. My mother spun toward him, her face an unflinching mask. "Graham, sit down. You'll regret this." But he didn't sit. "No, Valerie. I regret the years I let you turn our mistakes into prisons. I regret watching you erase a child's existence for the sake of a picture on a wall." The silence deepened. Even the waitstaff stopped mid-step. I pulled the printed receipts from my bag, laying them on the table for all to see. Wire transfers, the payable on death draft, the portrait proofs with mismatched metadata. This isn't a rumor. It's a paper trail, and it ends tonight. Jamie shook his head, whispering furiously, "You're destroying us, Claire." "No," I said firmly. "Mom's lies are what destroyed us. I'm just tearing down the curtain." My mother reached for the papers, but Ruth blocked her hand. "Touch them, and it's tampering." Valerie's voice cracked for the first time. "You think you're noble? You think strangers will applaud you for this? They'll laugh at us. They'll whisper about us for years." "Then let them whisper," Dad replied, his voice steadier now. "At least they'll be whispering about the truth." Mom's gaze darted between us, calculating, cornered. She turned her venom back on me. "You've chosen to humiliate your own family for pride." I met her eyes. "No, I've chosen to stop pretending the frame makes the picture real." And then, almost as if the house itself sighed in relief, the projector blinked black, ending the slideshow, but the silence it left behind was heavier than any image. Because everyone in that room knew nothing could ever be framed the same way again. The days after the dinner were chaos. Extended family called nonstop, some furious, others grateful for the truth. The lawyer, Ms. Ramirez, filed motions to secure the estate documents, freezing any suspicious transfers. Dad moved into a small rental, leaving the mansion for the first time in decades. He looked lighter, though his guilt lingered like a shadow. He promised me, "I'll meet him, the boy. I owe him at least my face, my name." Jamie, however, avoided me. When we finally spoke, his voice shook. "You've split us down the middle. Do you understand that? Half of them blame you. The other half blame her. And I'm stuck." "You're not stuck," I told him. "You're free to choose truth or facade." Mom tried damage control, emails to the family insisting the documents were misinterpreted, invitations to brunch where she spun narratives of persecution. But fewer people showed up each week. Her empire of image was shrinking. At work, I carried the strain like an invisible weight. Colleagues whispered about family drama. I lost focus grading papers. Nights, I scrolled the boy's photo on my phone, wondering if he knew any of this storm was about him. Ruth checked in daily. "This is the cost of lifting the veil," she said. "But remember, truth doesn't demand perfection. It demands persistence." Meanwhile, Ms. Ramirez confirmed the will addendum had no legal standing. It was forged. But the hush money trail meant tax authorities were now circling. "It won't stay private long," she warned. One evening, as I walked past the wall of portraits in my mother's house to collect the rest of my belongings, I noticed something chilling. Empty frames, glass polished, awaiting new photos. It was her way of saying the performance wasn't over, even if the actors had changed. And for the first time, I wondered how far she'd go to stage the next act. Weeks later, the storm found a strange calm. The investigation dragged on, but the family's silence broke in small ways. My father sent me updates about his tentative contact with my half-brother. Jamie confessed he'd started therapy, saying, "I need to unlearn what she taught us about appearances." Mom, however, remained entrenched. She left voicemails dripping with venom and sorrow in equal measure. "You'll regret this when you're alone," she warned. "Legacy is all we leave." But one evening, standing in my own apartment, I tacked a photo to the wall. Not a portrait, not staged, just a candid shot of my students laughing on a field trip. Unedited. Genuine. The kind of image that doesn't need retouching to mean something. For the first time, I felt free. At dinner with Ruth, she raised her glass. "You didn't just expose Valerie. You reminded us all what truth looks like." I smiled, though my chest still ached. "I paid for it with family ties." "Then maybe you'll build new ties," Ruth said. "Ones made of honesty, not glass." The boy's name came in an email later that week, this time signed by him directly. Just a simple line, "I'd like to meet someday." My throat tightened as I read it. I don't know what shape our family will take now. Some doors may never reopen. But I do know this. The frame is empty until we decide what to fill it with. And I will never again let someone else decide which faces deserve to be in it. Because I've learned the truth will always surface, no matter how tightly it's cropped. And it was then I realized my mother's greatest fear had finally come true. Her portrait had been replaced by reality.